利率决定已经出来了哈，最新数据还是维持 4.5 但是呢，川普有在他的个人的 Truth Social 说了好多整体来说还是为什么会刚刚放这个视频啊？这个视频是要让大家看一下这两位什么70多岁的前辈还这么努力工作，拯救国家啊！他要，而前值是 4.5 啊。先说回 FOMC 的那个利率啊，预期也是 4.5， 跟预期没有不一样，基本上不变不变。但是我们2点半呢，左下方还有一个鲍威尔上台。其实今晚的重点会是在2点半，2点半。他2点半会怎么说话呢？第一，对于这个 FOMC， 他会不会真的自己也说9月会有个降息，这个是第一点。然后再来第二，会不会说到一些就业的市场好与不好？如果是就业放缓，就是就业机会不好的话，那么就会降息啊。因为降息的话，对每个人都要有买房买车嘛。它降息的话就可以让更多人可以买得起房子啊，可以买得起车子嘛之类等等的。反正我们现在看一下这整体的这个结构哈，没有什么东西可以关注。目前还是跟昨晚一样咯，就117、1177这个位置蛮关键的，跌下去也没有成功的真的在下方形成任何结构。它有出现很多，从我们周二开始，然后周三，然后昨天都有三次的一个假跌破，不排除今天也会有一次啦。目前你们手上有什么多单还是空单？忘了打招呼啊！今天时间有点凌晨2点了。早上好 ，Zephyr、Venus、音律笔记、Frankie、小鱼、Safe 降力、七叶传说、基爷、Sean 白。稍后我们2点半再多半个小时一起看一下这个鲍威尔老鲍他会怎么去做他的演讲。通常他的演讲都非常短啊，在左下方这边哈，2点半开始，目前还没开始。然后今天除了 FOMC 美联储的这个利率决定之外呢，还有这个白宫会第一次发布这个数字资产的报告。这个数字资产报告其实是关于什么东西呢？就是在于美国会不会正式的对这个东西很宽松，然后他会不会去买入更多的比特币，买入比特币视为那个数字黄金这样。晚上好 Albert、Venus、Joshua、Suliana、Walter Jason。飲酒先啊，乾杯！有在喝。右上方这个呢，其实也没有很大影响。你看那个比特币一直不断买入，都还是很多人一直在买入。我觉得等一下呢，应该会有个大震荡，因为老鲍上台说话才是重点。他上台说话呢，他才会透露出更多的降息不降息，然后他自己亲口谈到就业机会、通胀的那个状况。如果通常第三，我是觉得他不会谈到了，不会说到任何东西，他应该不会去讲到任何关于那个加密市场或者是 ETF 的热潮。好，进来先点赞后祝你发财哈，祝你发大财哈。这个震荡不要当真哈，这个震荡小震荡而已哈。然后刚刚有在群早发了，我有在关注这个 EGLD 是一个 AI 币种，目前跟着那个 SNL 我们在等它第二次站稳。第二次站稳的话呢，如果2点半之后站稳，我不建议，如果你不会操作的话哈，如果你是不会操作的话，我不建议你在 你在新闻之前去下单呢，最好等他的那个不是新闻，老鲍上台说话了之后，你才下单，因为他在上台的时候，那个震荡是不是每个？如果你是新手的话，哈，最好不要去赌它了。我知道会有很多的人喜欢去赌一些那个 FOMC， 但是刚刚的 FOMC 你看，距离才多少？600-700个点，不值得，对不对？现在你卡在这边了，怎么办？所以不用去做任何的动作先哈，不用紧张先了，因为老鲍还有多25分钟才上台说话。我们稍后2点半会一起观看一下老鲍说什么东西。最主要是这3个点啊，这3个点。然后今天的那个白宫的那个加密政策报告，这个也是利好的。这个整体来说就是一个利好的一个新闻。Alright， 没问题的话，我们扣个1哈。今天应该看到3点吧，3点。我个人会怎么看呢？如果真的是非常利好哈，我肯定是希望它能够先打掉这个高点，然后在这边找到一个支撑，0.5也好，一个支撑也好，然后再看涨。如果它是一个怎么说呢？非常鹰派，老鲍也有可能是非常鹰派的，他就是说他坚决不要降息。他如果说出这样的东西的话投资者们都会离开了。怎么离开呢？我们来看一下4小时哈。4小时我们一直在防着的位置在哪里呢？一直在防着的位置哈，这边有一个支撑 ，alright， 你可以看一下这个，借我你的眼睛看一下哈，你留意看看稍后老鲍他的影响力，我也非常期待，因为我手上很多多单呢。OK， 目前是这个支撑这个 support 一直在撑住。如果稍后跌破，因为它好多天了，一直在177这边上下徘徊，走不出一个方向。这些都是震荡啊，整体从周2开始就一直在震荡，一直在震荡。如果稍后它非常鹰派的话呢，我会看这个地方跌破167这个地方。你可以稍微关注一下哈，这两个位置。OK， 支撑这边要怎么支撑呢？如果假设说它真的打掉，我大概抓一下，从这个位置大概打掉，它应该不会打得特别多，大概要抓的一个，大概要抓一个它的 0.5 回撤位置，差不多在1182。OK， 上方1182 0.5， 然后这个中间这个就不是很重要了哈，中间这个就变成震荡区间了嘛，震荡区间不足够让我们去做任何的开单的决策。这个没问题的话，可以扣个1哈，我们稍后看，一起期待一下老鲍究竟今晚他会不会怕自己被踩？刚刚那个视频是不是很好笑？刚刚那个视频就是话里话外都川普就一直在拿他来开玩笑。那个链接你们要的话，我发在那个留言区哈，你们可以自己去看一下。这个视频如果你有去关注的话哈，其实老鲍他都不开心，降息不降息又不是他一个人说了算。那黄色跳的视窗是什么呀？那个是秘密。秘密，先干杯了哈。然后除了比特币以外呢，还有这个 EGLD 咯，刚刚有讲的 EGLD 时间应该不是很够哈，应该时间不是很够，但是这一根形成了之后呢，我们可以做个试仓了，先过一过时间了。试仓的话，2%、3% 不会影响太大，反正都跟着那个策略做了嘛。这个是来自什么策略呢？它的摆荡低点去到摆荡高点，穿破了 VWAP 回撤成功，然后并且这根有站稳这个很长时间的一个支撑区间，那么 它能够这样走的话哈，这个水平线的流动性肯定是得拿的了。但是我们直接看到日开这边都 OK， 能够更高的话就拿完这些 internal highs， 就是内部高点。冷静哈，等等看哈，这根刚刚这根有站稳了，站稳的话，我们可以找个位置去做多单了。这个刚刚在1点半的时候已经有发进群了哈，可能赵兄已经开了，赵四开了是不是？对啊，这个视频很早以前呢，老鲍还没上台啊，那个视频也没有很早了，在多少天呢？1个星期前吧，1个星期前。OK， 找个位置可以在这个 EGLD 哈 ，EGLD 仓位不要太重，因为2点半会有大动静，这个只是拿来过一下时间，能拿个1.55这样，也不错。哎，什么歌？EGLD 是一个 AI 币哈，各位，来了哈，准备，等一下2点半之后会有大震荡啊。OK， 最佳位置会是在15.10，现在差不多了。记得仓位管理啊，各位，冷静冷静，这个用迷你仓就好了，过个时间就好了，真的。反正他有策略，有遵重那个策略嘛。有拿到什么价格可以写在留言区哈。啊，今天不会开那个相机啊。我等下看完他说什么东西就直接倒头去睡了。为什么他说的东西今晚会特别重要呢？因为就看他有没有关注这3个点。如果他亲口自己说9月会降息，你觉得比特币币圈会在9月之后才涨吗？当然不会啊，他立马就涨了嘛。投资者们看到，连老鲍自己都 surrender 了，他投降了，说会9月降息哈。然后又提及确实现在的就业又不是很好啊，那么我们又要降息了。然后通胀现在又真的，虽然现在通胀有受影响，那么大家都买得起房子，买得起屋子，买得起车子啊，降息了。稍后2点半哈，然后那个白宫政策的报告发布也是差不多同时段，目前还没刷到。直播间里的兄弟姐妹们应该都知道什么是鸽派，什么是鹰派哈。鸽派就是降息，鹰派就是不降息。如果非常鹰派，就是反而还要加息。不知道今天会不会有一个 surprise， 说是大加息，不知道。OK， EGLD 拿到什么？15.11啊，装丝15.11拿装丝的吧。带好止损啊，先拿到它的日开吧，这个过个时间就好了。今天没有什么太多，今天一整天都没有什么太多的做单机会，太震荡了。如果你说刚刚比特币那一波有看到什么东西应该要去做多，没有，确实真的没有。它10点半直接一根这样，你哪怕在这个位置真的看到它站稳了之后，你也最多只能够拿到多少呢？差不多500点左右而已。500点左右，然后你会期望说它会去打掉这个前高嘛？但是它没有这么做，这边也是有个 OB， 唯一比较好的做单机会就是在刚刚11点的时候到了 OB 这边顺势做空而已。 止损我们就拿在它这个 major support 是从7月13号就开始的一个，不是7月13，7月12，7月12。OK， 这个只是跟着策略做哈，记得带好止损啊，各位。14.92，这个是币安盘面啊，你得看一下你自己的盘面。如果你用这个平台盘面啊，它怎么说？它的那个点差是相对比较低的话嘞，你要自己调整一下。Fed 从来不怕事，应该不降息。我觉得川普刚刚他也有发了嘛，他说我听说啊，川普说听说9月会降息，然后他刚刚又发，鲍威尔今天可能不会降息，有史以来遇到过最透明化的一位总统了，什么东西都可以看得透透。OK， 我们点一点比较精神的歌，要不然真的要睡。有在喝的干杯了哈。我们现在等2点半，还有14分钟，14分钟。14分钟等老鲍演讲。有没有觉得看川普越久啊，感觉他蛮帅的哦？他已经70岁了，还可以保养的那么帅啊！干嘛不开？今天没化妆啊？男孩子要化什么妆啊？男人要化什么妆啊？就有点累了，我的眼睛要关了，其实。化妆。OK， 我们一起看一下 EGLD 嘛，过时间的单子。装饰应该在入场位置，还是入场位置吗？对，入场位置。这个策略是来自什么策略呢？如果你还不懂的话呢，可以去看一下我频道里头的那个策略。这个策略是 SNL-VWAP 策略。每天喝 Cola。盈亏比大概个1.5而已啊，1.5的盈亏比而已，时间不是很够啊，时间不是很够。先看到2点半。如果你是一个非常谨慎的话呢，你就先啥都不要打，什么都不要打啊。然后这个好忘了分享，这个我有 po 出来那个。OK， 白宫将于今日发布这个数字资产报告啊。什么是数字资产报告啊？通常大家读这个都是抓重点嘛，对不对？数字资产报告是由他的那个数字资产执行令，这个执行令呢是川普 executive 他签的那个 executive order， 然后发布这个东西其实就是在覆盖比特币啊、稳定币啊、CBDC 这些东西而已。已在110、109布局，哇，你看到那么低啊！然后传言，是否明确提议成立美国战略比特币的储备？还记得早期我们有讲那个 Bitcoin Reserve 吗？那个比特币的储备。这个白宫今日发布的数字资产报告呢，就是会 focus 就专注这个点了。然后稳定币第二点，稳定币监管是否会更加严格，或者是更加开放？ 其实就这两点啊，什么 DeFi 啊、NFT 那些都是一些衍生品。但是这个数字的这个数字资产报告整体来说就是一个我觉得哈，今天的这个老鲍他上台肯定是会说一些不是对币圈很好的东西，但是这个数字资产报告呢，它会作为一个 support 一个 backup 一个背书啊，怎么样都还是有数字资产报告，所以大家不要慌。币圈还是川普有在，币圈就在，以此类推了。反正这个报告稍后可以拿到之后发进群啊，应该在2点半吧，2点半有。刚刚美联储除了保持利率不变之外，他们还有就觉得说现在的美国的经济不是很好，这个可以去挖一下，这个三星管理了，7月稳息已无悬念，那个不是飞弹。那个是 buy orders， 那个是买盘。我们再看多一次啊，熟悉一下老鲍他平时 ，OK， 他在他自己的客场的时候他的样子啊，熟悉一下，稍后你可以看一下，他平时说话就很简短了。非常简短，但是他在台上说话的时候就不是那样。你看他刚刚有摇头吗？刚刚川普说他 over budget 了，他超出预算了，然后就摇头，拼命的摇头。然后川普再从口袋拿出一张他的证据，你真的有超出 budget 了。就是从一些小事、一些不痛不痒的事情，去硬生生的抓老鲍出境，就下马威这样嘛。Good afternoon， 上面地图不是飞弹哈，那个是比特币，这些都是比特币。你看他在老鲍解释了之后，我们没有 over budget 啊，那个东西，那栋楼是5年前盖好的嘛，然后他就说，没有那么危险了，现在我们把那个帽子拿下来，钱是自己赚，怕他什么？全球现在全球市场都会很密切关注今天的这个老鲍他怎么说话，因为其实他只要稍微的偏向更偏向降息的话，我们今天真的盖着眼睛去做多的都没有什么太大问题。我手上很多多单啊，还有好多多单啊。就因为有美联储，美国到现在经济还好，我觉得他们也很头疼了，因为美国一直把钱花在那个军事，一直在花在那个秀肌肉，所以美联储只能一直不断的印钱。大方向来讲，他现在降息的话，无非就是在承认了币圈。我觉得他们这个东西肯定有他自己的一些衡量，他的衡量，但是降息呢是迟早的事情，只是我们会不会今天看到一个 spike， 我只希望他今天能够更鸽派一点。 还有5分钟啊，5分钟。我先上个厕所。OK， 还有2分钟哈，2分钟。总结一句话哈，总结，2点半老鲍上台嘛。如果那个报告呢是偏向更宽松的，然后这个又有提到说这个国家持币的这个政策哈，然后又它偏鸽派的话嘞，那么我们就可能可以看得到一个非常强势的一个冲击 all time high。如果没有的话，大家就早点去睡觉就好了。反倒之，如果监管打压哈，那么短期来说，今天凌晨应该会在下探。下探的话，肯定是看115啊，115到110这个区间。准备好了吧？我们一起看一下哈，这个2点半老鲍上台。还有1分钟啊，1分钟。Casper 来了，我也好紧张，我有一些多单应该要打到保本止损了，我觉得应该要打到保本止损了。之前我有买入的一些 Solana 公链上的小币啊，位置都已经跌到差不多了。OK， 开始了啊，各位，我们听一下。现在2点半，看老鲍唱歌啊。 声音已经开得最大了哈。
Inflation has been running somewhat above our 2% longer run objective. In support of our goals, today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged. We believe that the current stance of monetary policy leaves us well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments.
他刚刚都说了利好比特币。
After briefly reviewing economic developments. Recent indicators suggest that growth of economic activity has moderated. GDP rose at a 1.2% pace in the first half of this year, down from 2.5% last year. Although the increase Inflation has eased significantly from its highs in mid-2022. Composition of price changes has shifted. Services inflation has continued to ease, while increased tariffs are pushing up prices in some categories of goods. Near-term measures of inflation expectations have moved up on balance over the course of this year on news about tariffs, as reflected in both market-based and survey-based measures. Next year or so. Of the economy and the evolving balance of risks before adjusting our policy stance. We see our current policy stance as appropriate to guard against inflation risks. We're also attentive to risks on the employment side of our mandate. In coming months, we will receive a good amount of data that will help inform our assessment of the balance of risks and the appropriate setting of the federal funds rate. At this meeting, we will continue its discussions as part of our 5-year review of our monetary policy framework. We focused on potential revisions to our statement of longer-run goals and wrap up any modifications by late summer. The Fed has been assigned two goals for monetary policy: maximum employment and stable prices. We remain committed to supporting maximum employment, bringing inflation sustainably to our 2% goal, and keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Our success in delivering on these goals matters to all Americans. We understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, your call. There's a lot of lean markets, not to mention out of the administration for a rate cut now in September. Is that expectation unrealistic at this point?
So, as you know, today we decided to leave our policy rate where it's been, where I would characterize as modestly restrictive. Inflation is running a bit above 2%, as I mentioned, even excluding tariff effects. The labor market is solid, historically low unemployment. Financial conditions are accommodative, and the economy is not performing as though restrictive policies are holding it back inappropriately. So it seems to me and to almost the whole committee that the economy is not performing as though restrictive policy is holding it back inappropriately, and modestly restrictive policy seems appropriate. All that said, there's also downside risk to the labor market. In coming months, we'll receive a good amount of data that will help inform our assessment of the balance of risks and the appropriate setting of the federal funds rate.
Just to follow up, by coming months, does that include the possibility you'll be getting essentially 2 rounds of jobs and inflation data between now and the September meeting? Is that potentially adequate to make a decision to lower rates at that point?
So you're right, we do have, this is an intermeeting period when we'll get 2 full rounds of employment and inflation data before the time of the September meeting. We have made no decisions about September. We don't do that in advance. We'll be taking that information into consideration and all the other information we get as we make our decision at the September meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You took out the word, or the notion that uncertainty has diminished from this statement. Does that mean uncertainty has increased? And I'm just wondering, the administration has struck several deals with large trading partners where it seems like we now know what the rate is going to be. Does knowing that rate add to your certainty to change policy, or do you need to wait to see the economic effects?
So, essentially, the statement in our statement about uncertainty reflects what's gone on since the last meeting. So, at the time of the last meeting, uncertainty had moved down a little bit, but it was more easy. Your second question is, say again.
There have been several deals that have been struck, and now we seem to have an idea of what the tariff rates are going to be with some of our large trading
It's been a very dynamic time for these trade negotiations, and lots and lots of events in the intermeeting period, but we're still a ways away from seeing where things settle down. We are clearly getting more and more information, and I think at this point, people's estimates, our estimates, outside estimates of the likely, effective level of tariffs is not moving around that much at this point. But at the same time, there are many uncertainties that have to resolve. It doesn't feel like very close to the end of that process, and that's not for us to judge. But it feels like there's much more to come, as well looking ahead.
Final domestic product has decelerated, slowest pace since 22. There was a weakness in the interest-sensitive sectors in residential investment, commercial structures. Are those not signs that monetary policy is a little too restrictive right now in the current economic
You got to look at the whole picture. year. So certainly, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, economic activity data, GDP, private domestic final purchases, which we think is a narrower signal for future has come down to 1.2%, for the first half, whereas it was 2.5% last year. So that has certainly come down. But if you look at the labor market, what you see is, by many statistics, the labor market is kind of still in balance. It's things like quits, job openings, and let alone the unemployment rate. They're all by many measures, very similar to where they were a year ago. So you do not see weakening in the labor market. You do see a slowing in job creation, but also a slowing in supply. Both demand and supply for workers is coming down at the same pace, and that's why the unemployment rate has remained roughly stable, which is why I said we do see downside risk in the labor market. Two main variables like inflation, stable prices, and so much more. So the labor market is strong. Inflation is above target, and even if you it's still a bit above target. And that's why our stance is downside risks to the labor market are certainly apparent.
So on labor, given the fluid labor supply situations, there are a number for this job report on Friday.
It's true that the demand for workers in the foreign just said payroll jobs, that number has come down, but so has the break-even number, kind of in tandem. So, as long as that puts the labor market in balance, the fact that it's getting into balance due to declines in both supply and demand is suggestive of downside risk. So we're of course.
Against those on the committee who, as of the June forecast, were in the camp of the Fed holding interest rates steady for the remainder of the year. And just in terms of the June SEP in particular, is that still the best representation of where the core of the committee is?
So on the dissents, what you want from everybody and also from the dissenter is a clear explanation of what your thinking is and thought carefully about this and put their positions out there. As I mentioned, the sort of the majority of the committee was up inflation's that calls but we had two dissenters who I think, expression, I think all around the table. In terms of, you ask about the June SEP, I wouldn't, you're right, that's what it says. I wouldn't point to it 6 weeks later as expressing people's substitute an estimate what the SEP might be. We don't have one. So I'll just say that, we haven't made any decisions yet except monitoring all the incoming data and asking ourselves whether the federal funds rate is in the right place.
And just on the point about policy being only modestly restrictive, scope to reduce rates once the conditions for a weakening of the labor market?
So let me say, or less restrictive even. We're going to be, at some point, when we return to moving toward a more neutral stance, we'll be making that judgment as we go. I don't think we have a preset course. It's not so mechanical as saying, we've derived with great confidence the neutral rate and that is our destination, because really we understand that no one actually knows what the neutral rate is. We know it by its works, and that will be how the way the economy reacts over time to
Chair Powell, my question is about what have you learned over the last few months starting to be settled with some of these more recent deals. Given the lags between when tariffs are announced and when they show up in goods prices, is 2 months a long enough horizon to evaluate the impact and be confident that tariffs aren't impacting the broader inflation process?
I think you have to think of this as still quite early days. And so I think what we're seeing now is substantial amounts of tariff revenue being collected on the order of $30 billion a month, which is substantially higher than before. And the evidence seems to be mostly not paid only to a small extent through exporters lowering their price. And companies or retailers, sort of people who are upstream, institutions upstream from the consumer, are paying most of this for now. Consumers it's starting to show up in consumer prices, as you know, in the June report. We expect to see more of that. And we know from surveys that companies feel that they have every intention of putting this through the consumer, but the truth is they may not be able to in many cases. So I think we're just going to have to watch and learn how much of this over a long period of time. I believe that the process will probably be slower than expected. Fast. And we think we have a long way to go to really understand exactly how it will work.
Is the reticence to look through core goods inflation being driven by the judgment expectations expected? Is it being driven by uncertainty over how restrictive policy is?
Raising rates. We haven't reacted to new inflation, but I mean I wouldn't insist upon that. But I think the base case, as I said, a reasonable base case is that these are one-time price effects. Of course, in the end, there will not be. This will not turn out to be inflation because we'll make sure that it's not. We will, through our tools, make sure that this does not move from being a one-time price increase to serious inflation. We want to do that efficiently, and that means we want to do it. If you move too soon, you wind up maybe not getting inflation all the way fixed, and you have to come back. That's inefficient. If you move too late, you might do too unnecessary damage to the labor market. So there won't be, in the end, a big inflationary problem. But what we're trying to do is accomplish that in a way that is efficient. But in the end, there should be no doubt that we will do what we need to do to keep inflation controlled. Ideally, we do it efficiently.
From Bloomberg Television and Radio. The one big bill, leaving aside the adjectives, do you expect it to add stimulus to the economy in 2026, and would that be an argument for remaining on hold or cutting back on the number of rate cuts So first,
there should be some stimulative effect, but it shouldn't be significant over the next couple of years.
And to follow up, what do you, well, I don't want to put this in terms of you and the president, so let me ask it this way. Do you have concerns about the cost to floating rates elevated for longer in terms of interest rate?
We have have to be able to look at the goal variables Congress has given us, use the tools they've given us to achieve those goals, and that's what we do. We don't consider the fiscal needs of the federal government. No advanced economy central bank does that, and it wouldn't be good for, if we did do that, it would be good neither for our credibility nor for the credibility of U.S. fiscal policy. So it's just not something we take into consideration.
Hi, Victoria Guido with Politico. When it comes to the renovations of the Federal Reserve's headquarters that the administration has been looking into, do you see their interest in that issue as being directly tied to the president's push to get the lower interest rates?
Through historic preservation at the National Capital Planning Commission, and a lot of back and forth there. Was very constructive. We started out to do the work, and I was quite pleased to have the president say multiple times that what he really wanted to see was us getting this construction completed as soon as possible. That is our focus, and that's what we're going to do. Residual seasonality. So we'll have, for example, 2 months of high inflation, sometimes early in the year, and then inflation turns lower, and a lot of that may just be an artifact. So that's why we look at the 12-month numbers. Look, I think inflation is most of the way back to 2%. There are things like the catch-up inflation. So, for example, all the insurance costs that are now going through inflation, they actually reflect inflationary pressures from 2 to 3 years. That's got to be in addition to core inflation from tariffs. So, and we can't really separate that out. We're not going to have a separate, kind of inflation that isn't the tariffs. We're always going to be dealing with all of inflation. But the composition, as I mentioned, has really changed. And if you go back to the last couple of years, it was all about services inflation, which was being very sticky. Now services inflation is coming down nicely. Goods inflation was well behaved before, and now goods inflation is going up. So the story has really changed. That's partially because of tariffs. It's also partially because we have restrictive policy in place, and we've seen that the result of that gradually work its way through the services economy.
The other thing I wanted to ask is, are you comfortable BLS can continue performing their mission effectively?
Agencies work that we continue to get better at data. That's what we've been doing for 100 years. We've been getting better and better and better. It's very hard to accurately capture in real time the output of a $20+ trillion economy. And the United States has been a leader in that for 100 years, and we really need to continue that.
can't see a place.
It's not our policy stance. What may be giving some companies will certainly be taking advantage of the fact of the tariffs and all the discussion of how they're going to, people, if the companies will raise prices when and as they can. And you saw it famously in the first administration of President Trump during those tariffs. Washing machines were tariffed, but dryers weren't. But what do you know? The price of dryers went up too, just like washing machines.
先别空哈，别空，别空，等这一根还有3分钟半。
That'll happen. We don't see a lot of that. I mean, what we see now is basically the very beginnings of things turn out to be goods inflation. And I'll say again, they may be less than people estimate, or more than people estimate. They're not going to be zero. Consumers will pay some of this. Businesses will pay some of this. Retailers will pay some of this. But we're just going to have to see it through.
Just following up, some additional tariffs have been in place since February, and things really haven't. So how do you justify somebody who's looking for prices facing a 7% mortgage and can't afford those rates? How do you justify that?
Well, so the housing is a special case, right? We don't set mortgage rates at the Fed, right? We set an overnight rate, and the rates that go into mortgages are longer term rates, like treasury rates. It might be 30-year rates, it might be shorter than that, but it's not the overnight Fed's rate. It's not that we don't have any effect. We do have an effect, but we're not the main effect. There are other things going on in the housing sector, and one of those is just there's kind of a long-term housing shortage that we have. We haven't built enough housing. This is not something the Fed can help with, and that'll be the case even after things normalize. So I think the best thing that we can do for housing is to have 2% inflation and maximum employment, and that's what we can contribute to housing. There are lots of other jobs to do. That's what we're trying to do. That would imply that you should move toward a more neutral stance of policy. This is the special situation we're in, which is we have two-sided risk to both of our goals. When we paused, inflation was above target and the labor market was pretty good. So that was a time when policy was restrictive when we paused. And to be restrictive is to be supporting a return to our inflation target, right? So as the two targets get back into balance, you would think you'd move in a way closer to neutral, and that the next steps that we take are likely to be in that direction. What will it take? It will be the totality of the evidence. As I mentioned, there's quite a lot of data coming in before the next meeting. Will it be dispositive of that? It's really hard to say. We don't make those decisions right now, so we'll have to see.
Well, I guess just in terms of inflation, though, for example, like some people point to if it remains only in goods and it doesn't bleed over to services, then maybe that's evidence that the tariff effect is going to be a temporary one-time thing. Is that kind of thing affect your thinking, or do you just need to see the number come down?
We'll look at everything. It's as I mentioned, a pretty reasonable base case is that this will be a one-time price increase, and in the end, we'll make sure that that's the case. We're just trying to do that efficiently. And efficiently means getting the timing right. So again, if we cut rates too soon, maybe we didn't finish the job with inflation, because our history is dotted with examples of that. If you cut too late, then maybe you're doing unnecessary damage to the labor market. So we're trying to get that timing right, and that's effectively what we're doing.
Claire Jones, Financial Times. Just a question on the dollar. We've seen it decline quite heavily this year. I was wondering if there's been any discussion about that at the meetings and how, to what degree that may be complicating your attempts to get inflation back to target. Thank you.
So this goes back to the division of labor between the Fed and the Treasury, as you I'm sure know, and the Treasury only speaks to the dollar. It's not something that's been a topic of major discussion at the Fed. I would say it doesn't come up. If the transcripts when they come out in a few years, they'll probably reflect some mentions of the dollar, but it would never be a major focus.
Just to follow on, if I may, to Andrew's question, I think the amount of imputed data in CPI now is up to 35%. I mean, is there any discussion of that as well? Is there any consideration of looking at alternative measures, data scraping and so on, in order to just ensure you've got a good read on what's happening to prices in the US economy? Thank you.
Yeah, we're monitoring the situation. We do, of course, as you know, during the pandemic, we looked at a whole lot of new kinds of data. People are looking at big data sets that you can get from all sorts of places, and we do all of that. But we really need the government data really is the gold standard in data, and we need it to be, to be good and be able to rely on it. And we're not going to be able to substitute for that, but if we have what we need.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Jay O'Brien, ABC News. President Trump has obviously invoked your name a lot. He has personally pressured you. Are you concerned the way that conduct might impact the Fed's independence going forward?
I'll just say that, I think that having an independent central bank has been an institutional arrangement that has served the public well. And as long as it serves the public well, it should continue to be respected. If it didn't serve the public well, then it wouldn't be something that we should just automatically defend. But what it gives us and other central banks, what it gives you is the ability to make these very challenging decisions that in ways that are focused on the data and the evolving outlook, the balance of risks, and all the things we talk about, and not political factors. And so governments all over the advanced economy have chosen to put a distance between direct political control of those decisions and the decision makers. So if you were not to have that, there would be a great temptation, of course, to use interest rates to affect elections, for example. And that's something that we don't want to do. So I think that's pretty widely understood. Certainly it is in Congress. And I think it's very important to say that.
You mentioned a slowdown in consumer spending, and I wanted to see if you could walk us through what was the discussion with the committee around that. We've seen delinquency rates rising for upper income households. How do you see that evolving in the next few months, and how much of a vulnerability that is for the economy going forward?
Consumer spending had been very, very strong for the last couple of years, and repeatedly forecasters, not just us, had been forecasting it would slow down, and now maybe it finally has. So I would say, if you talk to credit card companies, for example, they will tell you that the consumer's in solid shape, and that spending is at a healthy level. It's not growing rapidly, but it's at a healthy level, and delinquencies are not a problem. You mentioned high-end delinquencies. I don't know what to make of that. I read the same thing, but so generally, and if you look at the banks, and when the banks talk about in their earnings calls, the performance of credit has been good. So essentially, you have a consumer that's in good shape and is spending, not at a rapid rate. But it's true, and it was, again, right in line with what we expected. The GDP data that we got this week. And I think it's still a little bit difficult to interpret because you have these massive swings in exports, which may also be affecting, some of that can affect consumer spending as well. Look, it's one of the data points that we pay most careful attention to. And there's no question that it's slowed. And, we're watching it closely, but we also watch the labor market in terms of inflation. Those are our two variables that we're assigned to maximize.
And just to follow up on what my colleagues were asking about this sense, Governor Waller said that the labor market is on edge. She was pointing to weaknesses in the private sector. I was wondering, you said that the main number to look at is the unemployment rate. What was the discussion about the state of the economic adjustment?
So, I can talk about any individual's comments. I wouldn't do that. But I think what we know is that private sector job creation, certainly in the last report we'll see on Friday, had come down a bit. And if you take the QCW adjustment seriously, it may be even lower, maybe close to zero. But the unemployment rate was still low. So what that's telling you is that demand for workers is slowing, but so is the supply. So it's in balance. You've got a very low unemployment rate, and it's kind of been there for a year as job creation has moved down. But also we know that because of immigration policy, really, the flow into our labor forces is just a great deal slower. And those two things have slowed more or less in tandem. If you look at things like I mentioned, quits, look at wages are gradually cooling. Vacancies to those things have been pretty stable they haven't really moved a lot in a full year. So I think if you take the totality of the labor market data, you've got a solid labor market. But I think you have to see that there are downside risks. You don't see weakening in the labor market, but I think you've got downside risks in a world where unemployment's being held down because both demand and supply are declining. I think it's worth paying close attention to it.
Hi, Chair Powell. Nancy Marshall-Genzer with Marketplace. One question on the lack of unanimity in today's decision, the two dissents. Was there talk during the meeting? I know you're not going to talk about exactly what individuals said, but in general, was there talk during the meeting of cutting rates, and what was the case against that at the meeting?
Sure. So we have an economic go-around where people talk about the economy, and then the next, and so that's yesterday, and then today we have a monetary policy all the way around the table. Everyone gives their views. So the discussion around policy was the majority view was still what it has been, which is that inflation's running above target, maximum employment is right at target. That means policy should be a little bit restrictive, somewhat restrictive, because we want inflation to move all the way back to its target. So that's where people have been and still are. Two of our particular members felt that the time had come to cut, and that for the reasons that they're going to express. I won't tell you the reasons they'll issue some kind of a thing in the next day or so. But that's the story, and I would say, well argued, very thoughtfully argued all around the table, good arguments, and it's a situation where unusual situation. The economy is in good shape, but it's an unusual situation where you have risks to both your employment mandate and your inflation mandate. That's the nature of a supply shock. And it's probably not surprising that there would be differences and different perspectives. I will say what you hope is that people explain their positions very thoughtfully and clearly, and we absolutely had that today, all the way around the table. I would call it one of
the when you do get that confidence, would you be in favor of lowering rates right away?
It's not quite the way I would put it. I said that's why we think policy should be restrictive, is because inflation is above target. When we have risks to both goals, one of them is farther away from goal than the other, and that's inflation. Maximum employment's that goal, so you have to. That means policy should be risks to the two are more in balance. That would imply that policy shouldn't be restrictive. It should be more neutral, more a neutral stance, and that would be somewhat lower than where we are now. No one knows exactly what it is. So that's the framework. Obviously, looking at a lot of data in the next cycle, it is one of the cycles where we have 2 employment and 2 inflation reports, and we'll see where that takes us.
That you like to cite a lot is the final sales to private domestic purchasers. That was down to a 1.2% gain in second quarter from 1.9% in Q1, suggesting that there's some softening of underlying demand. I was wondering if you look at that, you combine that with some of the housing numbers, at the top of your remarks that the housing market is in fact weak, and the inflation numbers from GDP today came down 2.1% for headline, 2.5% for core. I'm wondering how much more movement you would need to see from these data points before you would be comfortable with cutting in, say, September.
It's going to be the total. Hard to answer that specifically. PDFP, I think, for the first half, private domestic final purchases or final sales, is 6. That's the whole half. You mentioned the quarters. So those are slower, but GDP is bumpy quarter to quarter, half to half, and often gets revised, after the fact. We still think it's the best data we have, and that shows wages, still at a healthy level, closer to what we would regard as long-run sustainable, consistent inflation. So the labor market is actually still quite solid. Inflation is above target, even ignoring tariffs. It's a little bit above target. So we're watching all of that, and again, trying to do the right thing when there's any challenging situation, because you're being pointed in 2 directions, and you have to decide which of those to go in. And actually, at some point, if they're sort of equally at risk, then you really want to be at a neutral policy stance, which we're not right now.
So it'd be safe to say that if the data be comfortable with cutting in September?
I'm not gonna I just think we're gonna need to see the judgment based on all of the data and based on that balance of risks analysis that I mentioned. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Powell. Greg Robb from Market Watch. The Treasury Secretary has said recently that it would be confusing for the markets if you stayed on as a governor after your term as chair ends. And I was wondering if you had any update for us on a decision on that front.
OK， 我们先看一下这个116能不能够守住。能够守住116的话呢，我们目前开始进入一个 markdown。这个 markdown 当然守得住的话，肯定会有个回撤啦。这个，如果你现在还持有个空单的话，建议先平掉一部分的盈利。刚刚我都好忙啊，一直在分批出场一些已经要到保本的单子。OK， 听一下跟冷静一下哈。 OK， 整体来说哈，刚刚老鲍他走得蛮安全的啦，就是没有，反而刚刚那一波空啊，很明显是因为他有说了一句，就是没有打算就是在9月会降息，这个是蛮重要的一个 factor 了。但是目前我们从4小时的间级别来看哈，它也没有跌破116，没有跌破116，为什么看116哈？116这边有个 FEG。116这边刚刚我一直在调整那个订单流哈，116这边有一个 FEG 哈，有一个蛮强势的一个 FEG， 目前就在这个位置这个区间一直在撑着这个青色这个区间，我头顶上。Alright， 然后简单来说，现在可能跌到个底，除非它回来哈，这个刚刚我们有画了嘛，回来在这个168、1675下方这边站稳。现在不建议去做任何的多空了。如果你真的要做多单的话，可以等它个结构反转或者是 K 线反转。我感觉今天的这个老鲍他就出来澄清一下了啊，大家不要希望9月份会有降息哈，因为如果降息的话，我们的那个通胀会很严重啊 ，inflation 会很严重啊，千万不要反手先哈，不建议现在反手。刚刚确实是出了个红锤子，但是这个红锤子不代表什么，我们也目前看到缩量了，已经缩量了。等多1根，等多2根嘛，要等多2根才可以看得到它的价格行为。都踩到，以太也是踩到 FEG 的位置就跌停。日 K 有什么影响？日 K 这根针很恐怖的哈，我觉得先等一下，我们会看多3点了，我的天哪！今天非常安全啊，没有提到第3个问题，关于加密的 ETF 这个完全没提到，然后就有澄清说没有9月降息的这个决定。我是不是多上去？没有啊，还没开啊。我们好多个月份之前，从5月份就开了好多多单了，所以刚刚在忙着出场，因为宁可先出场都不要让它打到保本啊。一些 Solana 链上的币种，我们的群友都已经有好多的多单在手上了嘛。不只是群友啦，如果你有一直在看直播间的，有关注有认真关注的话，应该都知道这个直播间从5月份开始就已经有很多多单了，不是很冒险啊，不是很愿意冒险做这一波的多单，先等它出个反转的模型出来嘛。如果刚刚你有在做空的话，就恭喜你有赚钱了，这是非常好的。做空的单子我手上是没有。每天直播吗？基本上都每天啊。如果没直播的话，大家可以去追踪一下 Casper 啊，也是一个蛮好的一位主播。而我们只能够等多2根啊，等多2根，4小时 没有出现任何重要的，还有40分钟，这一根就要成型。这根成型的话呢，我们要关注11750这个位置，11750这个位置是否能够守得住？11750这个位置，反正刚刚如果你有找进来的话，都已经有画出了这2个方向哈。一个是下跌这一波呢，这个区间里头肯定是追不了空，但是这一波派发 K 出现了很大的一个失衡区，如果这个失衡区让价格水平守得住在116750以下的话，并且有个主体有个 body 有个吞没红 K， 那么你可以再试个空单 maybe 抓到116FOMC 够狠，我刚刚都出了好几张多单了，刚刚的那个 Solana 公链了，基本上 JUP 啊，之前跟你们一起分享的，这些都是我手上的多单，这些都，哎呀，剩下几个 AID 而已。这一波牛市哦。这波牛市有点怎么说？但是也怪自己了，怪自己不够坚决，早点买入。交易所花了200点，那个赶紧去找你的交易所的客服啊！明明接在了真。OK， 这个是比特币哈，比特币 OK， 关注11750这边有没有个吞没红 K？ 目前整体趋势呢，如果4小时 K， 它真的能够有个 body， 至少到这边打掉这个前低点。什么时候你不能够再去做空呢？就是它收回针，剩下这36、37分钟，收一根很长的下影线。这样的话，在技术盘面上哈，我们是不会有看到任何change of character 或者是结构转换的。欢迎来到熊市，还没，还有最后一个关卡了，最后一个关卡这边，但是目前水平线是已经又往下跌了一级了。估计现在都要等明天的了。现在目前就是看它这一波空单，这一波空头的趋势稳不稳，是不是确认？新闻可以让我们看得到整体的一个方向就是9月份不会有降息，但是你知道 politician 啊，政治家都是很喜欢今天说1，明天说1.0001。或者是我有说吗？对啊，我有说，但是今天再补充。满身官僚气。刚刚他有访问提到说，川普这么给压力你哦，你不会说就是要更快的降息吗？他直接就说，哇，川普是一个非常对人民很好的一位领导，然后只要他是对 social 对 society 对社会对国家有贡献的，他都是一个非常好的一个领导。然后降息呢，我们肯定是现在就是就业机会和那个通胀出现了 imbalance， 出现了失衡区，所以他才。但是今天他没有说特别鹰派哈，但是他就是澄清了这个不降息的这个东西，它导致很多人因为降息，而看好币圈的人肯定会离场啊。我们还要等一下，可能之后川普他会出什么牌？因为刚刚我有看了一下那个数字报告哈，那个数字报告蛮好的，它是放宽，整体是放宽的，所以这个东西它的效果不比老报强。 至少从今天这个老报上台哈，我看得到有个支撑位在116。刚刚我有在留言区写嘛，116是个很强的支撑嘛。116这个很强的支撑，我们肯定要去再测试一下了。这个时候呢，不建议你就立马茫然的就冲进去，至少，这个歌怎么弹出来了？至少先等它的结构出来，等它结构出来。OK， 上方的我们尽量把那个盘面弄干净一些哈。这个已经不关事。目前整体结构，大家很明显都可以看得到是下跌的结构啦。但是从4小时盘面的结构呢，还没打破这个 swing low 这个低点。如果这个位置都破的话呢，那么可能在以后的直播就会跟大家讲，欢迎来到熊市。先不急啦，不急 ，OK， 不急，我们找右侧的机会入场更好。反正今天就差不多这样了，没有什么特别要注意。116是个 major support， 是一个主要的支撑，蛮重点的一个支撑。你看这个水平线很空的，很空，这条线下方都很空的。非常空。如果今天的结构能够吃回它至少 0.5 的回撤点的话呢，那么我们还是有希望可以看得到一波。到时候这个区间你肯定要标记一下，在自己的盘面173到167，167到173，它是由这一个区间出来的。OK， 这个区间出来的。8月前就说有鬼故事多，还行了，还行。反正现在等个结构出来吧。我先标记好，待会下播了之后，如果你还有在熬夜哈，你还有在熬夜盯盘。第一个 trading plan， 你可以看它有没有吞没红 K 在116750以下。OK， 这个是第一个 trading plan。第二个 trading plan 是什么呢？第二个交易计划是，如果它出现了一个结构 ，OK， 现在是直接穿破 VWAP 嘛，对不对？稍后如果它这边跌停出现了一个更高的低点的话，这个时常有在直播间跟大家分享哈，出现一个更高的低点，然后你就拿它的摆荡高低点画出你的 Fibo， 在618这边至少能够接到它的这个区间上方，至少区间上方，剩下的就要再看哈。反正现在是等不了。Fibo 要怎么拉呢？从它打出一个，现在是第一个低点，如果之后3、4、5、6根之后出现了一个更高的低点，你就拿它的产生这个新高低产生的一个高点、低点、高点、低点，然后拿它的618，大概这个位置。这个状况是没有出现任何吞没红 K 哈。Alright。然后回撤呢，我也不会建议大家看太远啊，最多到 TP2、TP3 有的话都很好了。可以哈，各位，1和2这个 trading plan 都了解的话，麻烦扣个1给我啦。我现在是有点烦他那个Solana 公链的 hold 了那么久，才都没拿到多少盈利，他就被逼要出场。点歌，我操，还点歌，要下播了，我现在真的要去睡了。我已经忍痛止盈 Solana 公链的，现在我就想要去睡觉，梦里啥都有啊， 梦里啥都有。希望那个 Solana 的公链啊，真的太 JUP 啊那些真的太不给力了，跌很凶，他们跌太凶了，一下子1根2根直接大派发红 K 的。OK， 我们看看啊，刚刚的 EGLD 清仓已经损了哈，这个4仓而已啊，过时间而已。你可以看得到哈，以太 Everything 其实很多都出现了跌停的迹象，为什么呢？因为到了关键的 FEG， 然后 TON 也是啊，这边也是有个 FEG。AIB 没有跌的那么凶 ，AIB 其实还好 ，AIB 手上还是有 AIB。Virtual 啊 ，Virtual 在 OB，FEG 回弹了。我个人的习惯哈，是，通常老报它下台了之后，不会冲动去下单呢，我会等看市场他买不买单，如果他买单的话，这边就是一个支撑位置；如果他买单，这边就是一个支撑位置。然后更多的是等他一个更高的低点结构出来。技术盘面我们只能够看到这样，剩下的就得交给川普，看他能够再出什么牌了。应该没有什么漏掉了啊！他有把这个通胀的问题怪罪于在关税啊。现在看川普怎么去拆这个炸弹先。反正9月份我们今天得到的一个总结哈，9月份不会有那个降息了哈。Solana 公链，我觉得大家可以再去看一下，不要太过依赖这个 Solana 公链。我觉得 Solana 链啊，这个还好，它比起 AIB 目前还是非常健康在浮盈，但是 Solana 公链上的币说跌就跌很多的。我给你看一下，这个是 AIB 啊 FET， 然后你再看一下刚刚那个 JUP， 我的天啊，这个 JUP， 然后还有那个 JTO。这个都是 Solana 公链上的币，还有哪个不是很好？直接跌到真空区，这种现在它是守在人家的，直接是跌破。刚刚我有看，它就还有一段距离到下方的 FEG， 所以其实 Solana 公链很弱。整体来看很弱。Alright， 然后人生如此有趣，好在没有压进去，骂几次看看有没有用。OK， 今晚大概就这样了哈。我们你也不要去冲动，现在立马开多。至少要等什么呢？等它的结构出来。无论你有没有看结构的习惯哈，今天你有来看到直播间，总得要有一个结论嘛，对不对？要做多的兄弟姐妹们哈，记得等个结构出来。OK， 等个结构出来了之后，对结构有了一定的那个 confirmation 那个确认点，才来去开多。如果要开空的，你肯定是要看16750这个水平线是不是被拒绝，被拒绝的 K 棒很容易啊，很容易辨识啊，就好像这根啊，这根锤子它是拒绝从哪里拒绝呢？它直接是拒绝在1160到1157这个水平线。这帮官僚掌握的不少，肯定掌握的很多。Alright， 所以我们明天见了哈，明晚见，真的要睡了。这个现在完全没有什么做单机会了。 不要冲动，自己的本金在手上，好的不得了。你今天没有亏钱，已经是非常好了啊。EGLD 那个不要讲了，那个过时间看一看，那个塞亚风的不够，都不降息了，这不得比特币回10万？不一定。他说不降息，但是全球币圈还有 ETF 啊，刚刚 ETF 他完全没聊到，没提到。然后别忘了川普现在稳定币啊，那个 Clarity Act 那个天才法案，这些通通都是非常利好的。我觉得今天这整个东西是在个大回调而已，一个回调，没有说很大，因为目前我们刚刚看了4小时间级别嘛，都没有开始 markdown， 没有开始 markdown， 我们目前还在回调的这个价格水平。Alright, nothing else. 我们看看明天伦敦怎么样吧。明天伦敦的会没开播的话，就会在群里发了。稍后如果你还有在盯盘的话，关注1和2的 trading time。如果你怕你忘记，自己可以先截图起来啊。好，感谢今天大家的没什么点赞，没什么点赞关注啊，没事，都夜了，早点休息哈，各位。最后再跟有喝酒的兄弟姐妹们干个杯了。整体今天的 FOMC， 川普把球丢给他，他又把球丢回给川普，这个是我个人理解的一个 conclusion。旧官僚对于新事物都认为是诈骗，这个不知道，但是我们只看见什么做什么。明天应该川普应该会抓他来骂一下。晚安哈，晚安，千万别冲动哈，现在结构都没出来，这波下跌结构连 FEG 都还没到，FEG 都还没到，你要去追空的话，这个太不冷静，太不理性。Good night。